In Westworld, the series about a theme park with robots looking indistinguishable from humans, wealthy guests can roleplay their wildest fantasies. The androids are programmed with a backstory and conscious artificial intelligence to have natural interactions within the boundaries of their role. Even when confronted with not being real, they react according to their programmed personality and continue with their plans. They start the same and interactions decide their fate, however violent it may be, before they are rebooted for the next batch of guests. Now everyone who's seen Westworld knows how well that loop worked out. But the concept of having non-playable characters with artificial intelligence that will generate a more adaptive response when interacting has been a long-desired prospect. But what are the approaches to achieve that, without AI becoming too unpredictable to be coherent? This is Upgrading Open World Games, a series that explores how current developments in game design and technology could improve the open world games of the future. In each video, I'll be focusing on only one design aspect, and this time it's upgrading artificial intelligence in open world games. The previous two episodes focused on the opportunities to connect characters and stories with more depth to better gameplay mechanics. This time I will look at the most important and underdeveloped component to bind it all together. Now, AI in games is more than just the behavior of NPCs. There are many components of AI at work, like how environments react, lighting, or even where the player character looks. But in this episode, the spotlight is aimed at how NPCs act. The current state of their AI is actually not real intelligence. Real AI learns to solve specific goals, but NPC AI is just a simulation of intelligence. It never solves or learns anything, but acts according to a set of if-then rules, dating as far back as Pac-Man. If Pac-Man eats the power pellet, then the ghosts will change their action from chasing to evading. And when the ghost returns into the maze, it will go circle its dedicated tower for a couple of seconds, before switching to chase mode again. These if-then statements that make characters feel alive have become more complex throughout the years. The advanced AI of Fear, for example, acclaimed for its leap in enemy behavior, had NPCs that didn't charge in fixed patterns, like cannon fodder in a shooting gallery. They might jump through a window when fired upon, or appearing to flank you. There are other AI systems in place as well, like their squad behavior and the timing of dialogue. So you won't hear an NPC shouting, "What's your status?" when his partner is just blowing to bits by an explosion, but rather something like, It's also a good example that game AI functions more like a master brain that controls all NPCs. It's not that each character has its own unique AI, but what parts of the AI master brain it's allowed to use. The rats in Fear, for example, use the same AI as the soldiers. They just have a lot less actions assigned to their behavior. Today's AI systems are becoming even more modular, consisting out of a large variety interlocked AI components that do very specific tasks. If an NPC needs to fight, it uses a different component than when it needs to find its way or have a conversation. These are all very simplified explanations that carry a lot more variation and nuance. But they are all still if-then statements, programmed to do one specific thing on a certain input.
Hey there, little guy.
And when it comes to combat, this works fine as it is. Fear's AI still holds up well this day and age. I mean, if you're enthusiastic about the next release of Tekken or Halo, is it because you're looking forward to their improved AI? It's more likely that new graphics, characters and mechanics are the main attraction, with AI that's pretty indistinguishable from prior installments. But as worlds keep increasing in fidelity, more is expected from its non-combat AI, and the less tolerant we become for unrealistic behaving inhabitants. And fidelity doesn't just mean more realistic looking graphics. It's about having less scripted characters you can interact with behaving grounded in their universe. The only function of No Man's Sky's NPCs, for example, seem to be about trade. Yes, they have raised lore, but none of it is connected to the planets you discover. There is no history to explore outside of the story mode. Today, some of the civilians crowding open worlds might have daily routines to have them be less aimless, but don't count on the kind of interaction that can change behavior or build relationships. Those roles remain reserved for the scripted personalities, so there's still plenty of room available for innovation. Behavioral limitations are also meant to minimize clutter, not to overwhelm you with options that lack focus. But for a medium like VR to succeed, it's desirable to have NPCs that you can speak naturally to. Because you don't want to have a drop-down menu appear offering you 3 different dialogue options. Having fixed conversations just wouldn't make sense. And progress in tackling this challenge will benefit open worlds as well. If only to ask for directions, finding a character, or learn more about their perception of the game's world. Regarding the innovation of AI, machine learning is all the buzz. AIs that can teach themselves by recognizing patterns and becoming more efficient than humans at diagnostics, driving cars and playing games. But that's not the kind of AI you want NPCs to have, because it's too unpredictable. Forza's Drivatar system, for example, also uses machine learning to power your NPC opponents, but not in real time. Drivatars are the AIs for cars based on real players. When racing, a large quantity of data is tracked. How I use my brakes, how sharp my corners are, do I drive aggressive and bump into others a lot, and how do my actions correlate to other cars on the track. This data is then uploaded to the cloud, where servers way faster than any PC or console are running the Drivatar machine learning algorithm to find patterns in the driving behavior of all players and create my Drivatar profile, an AI representation of my driving. So when other players that match my level are racing against computer-controlled opponents, one of them could actually be my Drivatar profile to give you a player versus player experience. It's impressive that machine learning can discover how players outfake opponents in certain situations, just by analyzing the collected data. But I can also influence that data by making deliberate mistakes. The neural network can't recognize if players drove bad on purpose just to upset the system. That's why there's still a human layer of inspection necessary to restrict the unwanted output of the neural network and preserve the desired quality. So for game development, machine learning AI is currently most effective as a powerful offline collaborator. That Forza's NPCs are trained by machine learning is already an exception. Its more common use is during development, with procedural workflows that improve the production speed, cost and quality of assets, enabling smaller teams to make larger worlds, for example, or help with character design, and in the near future perhaps to turn sketches into concept art, or generating animations without needing a costly motion capture system. But whatever it's used for, still refined and finalized by people checking the quality before it's released into the world. Any NPC that can change behavior through player interaction will always be less predictable. And the more variables those NPCs are going to have, how larger the possibility of them making choices that could break the game. When Bethesda was working on the AI of Oblivion, their goal was to make every NPC an autonomous part of a living and breathing world. By giving them a daily schedule where they have to eat, sleep and work, they have systemic interactions without needing the player. But during testing, developers learned that NPCs who were addicted to an in-game drug were slaughtering merchants, because killing them to get the goods was easier than buying, causing key figures that advance the plot to suddenly be murdered by rogue AI junkies. It's a simple example of how interconnected variables of AI that aren't properly tweaked can totally break the game's balance and therefore its enjoyment. If-then statements that led to uncontrollable chaos caused the developers to take less risk with the AI of Oblivion's sequel Skyrim, reverting to more scripted NPCs. More AI is much harder to balance, because it affects most of the game's mechanics that all need to work in harmony. And more possible behaviors also need a lot more variations in animation and dialogue, probably even more than can be recorded in advance. So new procedural techniques are needed to create enough diversity, without needing bigger teams to make it affordable. The realer game worlds feel, however, the tiniest mistake can have far greater impact. It's like an uncanny valley of immersion. I mean, players will be a lot more forgiving when encountering weird walking AI of NPCs than if it were the robots of Westworld. So the challenges to overcome in creating more autonomous NPCs that act believable are becoming increasingly difficult. Yet this seems the most likely direction for innovation. But what's the path to get there? Let's start with the view. To have less predictable NPCs, games have to become better at tracking the data from its universe. Its use now is still very limited. Left 4 Dead, for example, has a director AI in charge of spawning enemies and items. Its purpose is to control the pacing of intensity by reacting to player behavior. And in Alien Isolation, the player is trapped on a space station that has the infamous xenomorph lurking aboard. Its AI is a behavior tree, known for dealing with large quantities of if-then rules. The alien has 36, like search area or climb and vent, a lot more than a soldier in Fear. But there's an additional director AI, tasked with tracking the player's location and more, pointing the alien to the area where it needs to search, thus controlling the ebb and flow of tension, and preventing the possibility the player might never see the alien. Those are just its basics. An additional trick is to make the alien appear smarter over time, by unlocking its more advanced behavior later in the game. Like it won't check lockers or attack from the ceiling vents in the starting missions. So even though it looks like the alien has learned something new, it's actually a more director-like decision that now unlocks a new skill in the behavior tree to crank up the pressure and make it more challenging for the player. Metal Gear Solid 5 is another example of AI that manages drama with the help of tracking. NPCs can change enemy loadouts to better counter the player's approach. If the player eliminates most of his enemies with headshots, then they will be wearing helmets at later stages. But if most of your kills are body shots, then they will equip bulletproof vests instead. And in the Batman Arkham games, the AI triggers contextual dialogue, meaning if the player uses smoke to escape, then the witnessing NPC could call this out.
He got away. He's using smoke.
Making the characters feel less generic and responsive to their environment.
That's all it was? Fire extinguisher? Ooh, I need to chill the hell out.
Even Shadow of War's Nemesis system, that generates emergent narratives through the events of interconnected characters, is more a director decision than an AI controlling NPC behavior. It might seem that an orc revenging his blood brother or save you in the last second is behavioral change, but these two are triggered events based on a track relationship score. In Shadow of War's case, aim to have specific ranked orcs intervene at the most dramatic moment. So it's the combination of improved director-like AI and NPC AI that will generate better tailor-made experiences, both using tracking, not just to optimize the timing and intensity of events, but also to have NPCs capable in procedurally generating behavior. That could lead to system-driven storytelling with far more dramatic depth than Shadow of War. But if you will eventually get NPCs with multiple personalities, able to make decisions through their emergent experience, the variations of possible dialogue and animations need to be vast to realize desirable responses that avoid repetition. Which brings us to the next challenge. Too many possibilities leads to much longer scripts, quantity at the expense of quality. And the solution isn't more writers, but a different approach with the help of AI. This is not even the complete Japanese translation of Cyberpunk 2077, for instance. Still, it contains plenty of NPCs repeating throwaway lines.
Why's everyone got it out for me?
The amount of dialogue necessary to have open worlds in which talking feels natural is too ambitious to achieve with actors alone. Potential help might be found in the progress of natural language processing systems, a component of AI that can deconstruct the structure and meaning of a sentence to generate the best possible answer, mostly used for chatbots and virtual assistants that converse with humans by procedurally generating sentences. A simplified explanation of how it works is, first you talk to a computer, like your phone. The computer captures the audio. Audio is converted to text and deciphered for its meaning before it replies. A good indicator of what it's currently capable of is Amazon's Alexa SocialBot price. an annual contest dedicated to advancing conversational AI. The challenge is to present a social bot that can hold a casual conversation for 20 minutes.
Alexa, let's chat.
Like small talk with a companion.
Okay, I was thinking, do you have a tattoo?
The difference with games, however, is that these conversations are about the real world. If the social bot is telling a story, it has the internet as an inexhaustible resource of data, like Wikipedia and news sites to construct sentences.
Will artificial intelligence ever catch up with humans in performing most activities?
And in other research, it's impressive that Google achieved to assign conversational AI to an object like the planet Pluto and have it answer questions.
What else do you wish people knew about you?
I wish people knew that I am not just a random ice ball. I am actually a beautiful planet.
Or as a paper plane.
What's the farthest you've ever flown?
I've flown over about 1,500 feet. The wind was perfect that day.
But it becomes a lot harder when similar technology needs to converse about a fictional world and produce the same quality of coherent sentences in a chit-chatty way. Event Zero has an early attempt of using this technology in a game. When your escape pod arrives at an empty space station, you'll meet Kaizen, the chatbot-like AI. It's essentially a puzzle game in which you need to ask Kaizen the right questions, figure out what happened and get you back to Earth. Game Maker's Toolkit has a detailed explanation of how this works. The quick version is that Kaizen assembles its answers similar to a chatbot. But the big difference with our assistance is that Kaizen doesn't pretend to be humanoid. It's a conscious choice to have a glitchy chatbot, so it's allowed to make errors. The huge leap it must take to get from one virtual assistant to multiple fictional NPCs with dynamic personalities able to separate speech between a wealthy character that is stupid or a smart one that is poor is still a long way from fixing, even in text alone. If it's ever going to work remains to be seen, but how it's going to sound is another part of the difficult challenge that many researchers are exploring. Until recently, to get the best text-to-speech result, specific phonetically rich sentences are recorded.
Thus, Jacobi's theory terminates in a finite, on the whole in finite steps.
They can be cut into the smallest unit of speech called phonemes. This becomes a data set of sounds that can be reassembled to pronounce every word and sentence. Now, with the help of machine learning, the speed to get better results has much improved. It's how researchers succeeded in having Joe Rogan say everything they like.
Welcome to another episode of I'm Not Joe Rogan. No, seriously. I am not. This is Joe Rogan speaking, an artificial intelligence created by Tessa.
And they achieved this by ripping only 8 hours of voice data from his podcast. And at Ubisoft's La Forge department, where they make prototypes based on the most recent and promising research papers, they're experimenting with this as well.
What if I told you that everything about me is driven by artificial intelligence? My voice has been generated from a simple text file, which then drives my lips animation. It's totally automatic, takes just a few minutes, and soon will work in real time.
But like digital assistants, what's still lacking is controlling the emotional tone of these voices. You won't hear text-to-speech being angry, sad, disgusted, or scared. They never whisper or shout. No character-defining traits, accents, or speech disorders. And if an NPC sounds flat, it would immediately disconnect the player from the experience.
I don't think I can ever forgive you for that.
Companies like Sonantic and Replica already claim to have algorithms that can add emotions to voice synthesis and improve this.
I can't work with you. You murdered her.
To this.
I can't work with you. You murdered her.
But not in real time. And Google demonstrated an upgrade to their assistant that improved the understanding of nuances in conversation by pretending to think while making a reservation.
Oh, I gotcha. Thanks.
They described adding and sounds as an additional input that could include emotional expressions and accents as well, although I haven't found any examples of this yet. But just as there's now an AI that can generate pictures of persons that don't exist by combining input data, it's not unlikely that text-to-speech synthesis can eventually do this for voices in real time. Not only combining the emotional state of dynamic characters with procedurally generated text, but even blend the characteristics of various voices to create a new one. Developments that are somewhat linked to having more adaptive animation that go beyond just lip syncing to accompany it all. previous character depth episode already hypothesized the possibility of AI as a collaborator. To have real-time generation of cutscenes with animations that can adjust to track data accordingly. But in a future where NPCs behave with more agency, it's going to be inevitable anyways to have procedurally generated facial expressions and body movements that adapt to the character's state. AI having to match all those emotional variables in real time has sparked the idea of requiring an additional chip. The company EmoShape believes that the next generation of computers, besides their central processing unit that carries out the instructions of a computer program and graphics processing unit that can render the visuals, should also have an emotional processing unit, which deals with managing the emotional state of NPCs and trigger their expressions. So when linked to a character model that uses text-to-speech synthesis, you could get a sentient NPC that can respond with dialogue and animations in real time, based on the input it's receiving from the emotional processing unit. And although all these developments sound promising, I still think we're a long way off. The only demos I could find aren't very convincing. I haven't seen the EmoChip NPC output dialogue yet, and NPCs that do procedurally generate sentences are slow to respond and without emotion.
Can I get a deal? 3 for 1 hot dog?
Sorry, we can't do that.
It involves a lot of components that need to work in sync before we get acceptable results in real time. But assuming the patterns in current developments, this seems one of the most important obstacles to overcome, if the goal is advancing character behavior. There are a lot of bottlenecks, of course, and one that stands out is what you see here is how the computer only loads what's on the player's screen and nothing more. See how the grass is disappearing from memory on the left once it's outside of the player's view? Hiding details that aren't directly visible is to minimize burdening the computer. And this is but one of the magical tricks used to determine what visual assets are most important within the memory limits. There are also the NPCs inhabiting the world and require more than just graphical resources. They have all kinds of behaviors, like walking and driving patterns, that require memory as well, as long as they are near the player. It's to avoid frame rate dropping to bad stop motion when the computer's memory can't keep up with all the info it's trying to track, and avoid a similar effect when having an overkill of characters on screen. But this allocation of memory won't work when having more reactive NPCs. If I steal this car, for example, it should leave an impact on the NPC I push out of his ride. At least in the sense that if I accidentally meet him again, he will probably have remembered it and act differently. Recent experimentations with this can be played in Watch Dogs Legion, that also shows what's not working yet. In Watch Dogs Legion you can recruit anyone in London into your hacker rebellion. Take this character I ran into, Phaeton Lau, a former child actor turned living statue, and if that doesn't sound like someone with a story, then let's make sure to give him one. Since Mr. Lau is a DedSec sympathizer, we can ask him to join in return of a favor.
Help me out and I won't forget it. One good turn deserves another.
But instead of helping him out, I'll give him something else he won't forget. And since I have his schedule, I start stalking him after his recovery from the hospital. Showing up when working.
That's fantastic.
When dating his DedSec-hating girlfriend.
Do you need to stand so close?
When mourning.
Bugger off!
All this just to test if he's still willing to be recruited. A lead tells me our friend is also trying to take down a weapons dealer in his spare time. Although not very plausible, I give him the benefit of the doubt and download some incriminating data of his target to help his cause and get him to talk to me again.
Are you with DedSec?
All previous encounters seem forgotten or forgiven, and this time I do help solve his problem, so I can finally recruit him.
Thank you. I'm ready for action.
Well, we'll see about that. So action is what he gets, and I hospitalize him again, the second time. Even so, once back on the street, he's still
Ready to go?
It's about time.
Before he does, I just wanted to say hi one last time, but it seems he failed to remember me, even after everything I put him through. That either makes him have memory loss,
Haven't seen something so jolly in years.
or proves him to be very compassionate towards psychopathic behavior. Maybe because he's a psycho himself, able to single-handedly infiltrate the corrupt police station as a ninja killing machine and later have his revenge. Funny, Maybe. Immersive? Not so much. The point is that the more dynamic the role of the NPC becomes, the more you'll notice everything that's out of character. And in Mr. Lau's case, there's hardly any correlation between his behavior once on the crew and his profile before recruiting him. I've met a DJ who's building robots on his YouTube channel, a sex worker who self-publishes romance novels, a former wedding singer turned street musician, but none of that matters. Once they are on your team, they turn into mindless minions that carry out the given tasks without question. They will never mention anything about their previous lives and only talk about their mission. The only thing that is somewhat related to their personality is the perks that remain and the class they are in. Meaning that a granny will never do a dropkick, and that a social media influencer might have her own sports vehicle, that a risk analyst could have shorter arrest time, and that a lot of homeless people have automatic firearms for some reason. So it's more functional as a parody simulator. If you want to free London with a bunch of yoga instructors, for example, but not at generating interesting personalities. Still, this attempt has much more potential than to keep relying on the beaten path. But imagine the memory it must take before we have a simulation able to generate less scripted interactions with depth. It will take an extremely powerful computer to track and synchronize all the relevant player and NPC data. It's plausible that this progress will first emerge on a cloud gaming service, when developers get creative with its unique infrastructure and ultra-fast internally connected top-of-the-line hardware, perhaps with dedicated processors that only deal with emotion. The only similarity between NPC and Westworld AI is their role. To have the NPCs behave more lifelike, but definitely not by making them conscious. To think that putting a brain, the organ we know the least about, into a creation that doesn't share any of our physical traits and real life experiences is going to have behavior that are lifelike, seems naive. AIs don't have an inner experience, don't understand cause and effect, or the meaning of the sentences they produce. They can't reason and have no nuance, and most of everything else we describe as common sense.
You see that shit?
But there's plenty that if-then AI hasn't achieved yet, to improve the illusion of NPCs having emotions. Picture what this envisioned future AI could do for a game like Watch Dogs Legion. With enhanced tracking and data interpretation, NPCs could stay in character while still adapting to change. And behavior with relations become more believable, unlike Mr. Lau's. It will allow for the bios to be part of their identities after recruitment, implementing their past experience to shape a matrix of team dynamics. A director AI could help to better time the events that have impact on the moment-to-moment gameplay, not just for enemy encounters, but interactions with friendly NPCs as well. Like having a teammate intervene using her skill as a drone specialist and remembering that moment, all to improve the drama. With the help of natural language processing, NPC dialogue no longer is a scripted performance. Instead of having different NPCs uttering the same lines, a pipeline of tracked data points like their history, their skill, and what they want will influence what they say, not only as procedurally generated text, but turn it into speech with the right emotional tone, including proper animations, synced and without latency. Another side effect could be significant improvements to the post-game. After Watch Dogs Legion's ending, London might be in a different state, but that's hardly a change you'll notice while playing. The most notable things that are different from when you started are the upgrades you now own and not the influence you had on the city and its people. This is also a reason why open world game endings tend to feel less satisfying. In Breath of the Wild, you'll never see Hyrule after defeating Ganon. In Ghost of Tsushima, you can't end a war. And plenty of other open worlds essentially stay the same or revert back to the last moment you could still traverse the whole map, right before the main story ended. Eliminating the potential of experiencing a changed world with NPCs that remember the climax of events. That could revive the whole post-game concept. Overall, when AI achieves to make NPCs more dynamic, like in Westworld, but without the trauma, storytelling will shift to become more system-driven anyway, with less focus on scripted storylines and more on goals that can be achieved through a variety of possibilities, allowing players to create their own stories that have more to offer than just action. My next video will be about tools for expression. Because when story and characters become emergent, perhaps having a multitude of interconnected NPCs that someday can change, players will have a greater role in shaping the narrative by default. And when they're co-authors, there's also going to be an increased interest in possibilities to capture that experience. But that's next time. Meanwhile, please use the comments to share how you think AI should be improved to have better games, or share examples of AI that most impress you but seems forgotten. And if you'd like to see more of these videos, subscribe and click the bell to be notified when new videos are online.